Welcome back to Digging Deeper. Today, we're here to tell all. We've worked with hundreds of clients over the past 6 months, helping them fill technician roles. Auto, diesel, marine, ag, dealer, trailer, forklift, construction. And we're here to tell all the nitty-gritty details of what makes you successful and what hurts your chances. Join us today. And we're back. Let's set the stage and review some stuff that we've talked about previously on previous episodes where we've talked about technicians. I'm going to throw you some stats from our new technician survey, What Attracts Experienced Technicians, which will be sent to everyone that joined us if it's ready. So, of the people that took our survey, and we're going to get more of these stats as we go, but 76% had 10 plus years of experience being a technician. 61% have not changed jobs within the last 5 years. 60% reported making above $75K a year, with I think 32%, somewhere in that range, reporting $100K plus. We have talked about this previously, but essentially if we look at the population of technicians, this is a rough estimate. It is somewhere between 70 to 80%. And I think this survey pointed that 70 to 80% of technicians are not actively looking for jobs. And it seems like the ones who tend to be looking are not the experienced technicians that you necessarily may want or are in need of. We have been running hundreds of campaigns for hundreds of clients over the past 6 months, helping to locate different technicians that's like auto, diesel, marine, agriculture, dealer, service, trailer, forklift, construction, all types of dealers. And we've learned a lot. So with that caveat, what insight has stuck out the most to you so far? You first, Aaron.
Process. I think one of the keyword or phrases.
I thought there was going to be more of that.
No, I'm getting
That's
there.
it.
I think
Process.
one of the phrases we've said, we want to be a partner in your process.
Yeah.
We identified early on that if the job is good, it's competitive, and the messaging is good, and the audience is good, and the process is bad, none of it matters.
Give me more on that. What do you mean by process? I mean, I think it's somewhat self-evident, but just for the 2 or 3 people that don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to let Seth answer, but I want to give in addition to your stat earlier. You said something 70 or 80% aren't looking for jobs?
Yep.
I know I've seen that somewhere too. In the meetings I've been in, just taking a, anecdotal poll, I would say 80% of the prospects we've talked to before they started doing business, 80% of their budget, if they are doing any advertising, is spent on job boards where the people aren't looking. So 80% aren't looking, but 80% of your budget is going to
towards people who are actively looking because they're on a job board.
Very small. Yeah.
Which there's nothing wrong with the job board, and active job seekers can play a role in your attempts to fill roles at your shop.
And should.
But you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. What has been your big takeaway over the past 6 months?
All right. So I'm going to give you a two-parter here. Part one to talk about, build on what Aaron was just talking about, which is when we talk about process, I think a key word to keep in mind is friction. So how much friction is built into that process? Because if you're trying to target, or we're trying to target individuals who aren't actively looking, then you've got to make that process extremely easy for them to do that.
Right.
And we can get more into that. But the second thing I wanted to add is you mentioned early that we're having conversations with hundreds of shops, dealers, fleets across the country. Mm-hmm. And they offer one type of perspective. And we're going to talk about what we're learning from those conversations. There's a whole second piece here.
Yeah.
which is we have a team of people not talking to employers, but talking to technicians and mechanics.
Right, on the RPO side of the
Yep,
business.
our partners team. So we connected with them to get additional insights about what they're hearing on their side. And my biggest takeaway from that conversation is they weren't surprised because they do it all the time. But something that I think the biggest takeaway for me is how willing somebody who seems happy in their current role is willing to have a conversation about what else might be out there. So yes, you mentioned all those stats in the beginning. They tend to stay where they're at. They've been there 5+ years, lots of experience, but they are willing to have a conversation about what else is out there.
So I have more stats for you on that. So same thing. It's like only 21% of all the technicians that we surveyed said they would recommend their shop to another tech. And most people, only 28% of technicians said they strongly agreed that they felt valued and respected at their current job. What that does is it lends perspective to the idea that while they are not changing jobs, the idea that they wouldn't be willing to for better pay or better culture or a better balance or better hours or something of that nature is false, because they're not changing jobs because they don't think it's worth it. But if you could make it worth it, they definitely would, because it's not like they're blown away by their current role.
I agree. I would say in the small sample size, the experienced technician is a very loyal employee too, which I think most folks we've talked to that have, 10+ year technicians, extremely loyal, which is a incredible trait.
Yep. All right. So let's dig in. We said process. You said process. You said process. Everybody said process. I think even Audrey said process. I promised the good folks on this call, I never can figure out what to call this pre-taping. I promised them a tell-all.
Okay.
So I want to hear some, like we said, process. There's issues with the process, and this is the number one thing that has stuck out in our hundreds of clients. What do you mean? Like, give me an example of this part of the process made it much harder to actually hire somebody. I want real stories. Just we'll bleep out the names.
Okay. So it starts from the very beginning. And we could even go to the job posts themselves.
Okay.
And I think you were mentioning a good story that you might want to tell.
I mean, when we're doing just kind of a get to know the client, I mean, we joke about it, a little bit of a speed date on both ends. Who is Randall Reilly? What do we do? And then, tell us a little bit about you guys. What are you great at and what do you need help with? So they went through really good benefits, above average for the market. We're going through our own data just to see, hey, you're standing out in multiple, sign-on bonus, pay, Monday through Friday, first shift, temperature controlled, really good stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, this is really good. And we tried to do some due diligence on our end before we got here, so we didn't have to ask all these questions. Where can I find this information? I don't see it on your website. And we went to Indeed and ZipRecruiter, went to a few different places. I don't see it there. They were like, that's a good point. I think some of our postings have probably expired. And yeah, we don't put any of that on our website. I'm like, well, the good news is we're going to be able to help you.
Yeah. All right. So if we're talking about process things that are hindering you from hiring, one is like, if you go to your website, there's nowhere someone could find why they should actually work for you. It's like your job here is to change the mind of someone who is, maybe they're not the 10+, but let's say 5+ years. They're willing to change for the right scenario. And
oh, wow.
And there's no way they could even know what that scenario is they're trying to change for.
We definitely picked the extreme there.
Okay, yeah, but that's one area.
Well, I was just going to say, but there's a much larger group that is potentially attending this, that you think your site is good, and it's just not. And there's still a lot of friction. It doesn't give a whole lot. It's 80% requirements, not benefits. I feel like we've talked about this before, but I think the bigger majority would say, oh, we have a career page and we have jobs on there. it's still brutal.
Right.
And I have one other one that the only option was to email HR. So again, they had the information. You just had no way to apply.
I want to get y'all's feedback on this one within that same realm, not to chase too many rabbit trails. But one stat from the technician survey, which I will send to you, which I will be sending to you, is that when asked their preferred way to apply for a job, 58% responded with on a computer. That goes against everything we know about how the internet works. The vast majority of traffic is mobile. The vast majority of job applications not within this market are on mobile. I feel like that's indicative of what you're saying, is that if I go to your careers page, it's a bit of a nightmare, and I wouldn't want to do it on a mobile device either.
It's 100%.
100%. Well, there you go.
And when you first shared that stat, I was like, you said it wrong, right? That can't be right. And that, as we talked about it, and Aaron even mentions, he's like, no, that completely makes sense when you think about the demographic that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the loyalty, right? So if they were maybe searching on Indeed, it might be through a mobile device, but this group of people maybe aren't going about it that way.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would not go there. They would go to a website or something else to begin to learn about what they saw.
Well, and because
or
of so
heard.
much friction, I mean, if you have not, I know you talked about this in one episode.
Mm-hmm.
Secret shop your own career page on a mobile device. It's a nightmare. So it does not surprise me that they're using a computer. You probably would cut your time in half by using a computer instead of a mobile device because of how difficult it is.
Okay, so we've hammered that one a little bit. I want another tell-all, another dirty tale of things you have discovered in the process that is really hurting people's ability to hire technicians.
So I think a big one is phone calls. So on the front end, we have conversations with folks and say, hey, they're going to want to learn more about the job. And if there was something that caught their eye and they're interested, let's have that conversation right away.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to move on with their day, or they might move on to someone else. So are you willing to take a phone call? And the answer isn't always yes. And the reason for that, it makes sense, is they don't have a team dedicated to just answering phone calls to fill technician roles or mechanic roles.
Right.
So what do you typically say when somebody says that, Aaron, when they're like, well, hey, we don't really take phone calls. How do you respond to that? Or what would you say to help people through that?
There's a couple things. I empathize with it, because if the call is going to go to HR, who doesn't really know the role or the job, then it could be a waste of time for the technician if they do call. And the person who does know the job, they're busy running a shop, and I can see where they're coming from, saying, hey, I only want to look at the resume and then I'll decide who I want to talk to.
Right.
The problem is you're missing out on a very large percentage that, they just want to ask a few questions. So there's two things that I see. One is most experienced technicians aren't available for a call 8 to 5, which is when some of our clients say, yeah, you can call me from, 9 to 3.
The preferred time for a recruiting call for technicians, according to our survey, is first thing in the morning on a weekday. So I guess that's before the day gets going, is how I would assume that is thought of, or after work on a weekday, which completely eliminates your kind of that 9 to 3 range.
Makes sense. The other piece, with the certain percentage that will take a phone call, or they try to make outbound phone calls back, and they say, well, we can't get them on the phone. Obviously, there's speed to lead. There's all kinds of stuff there. But one of the things that I found, the greatest success stories are the ones that either have a platform or the ability to text first, just saying, hey, this is so-and-so with XYZ company. Love to talk to you about the technician opportunity you filled out some information for. Be on the lookout for this number. I'll be calling you in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Those folks get people on the phone. Or somebody replies back in a text and says, hey, I'm working right now. Can we talk after 6? If you're just making these outbound phone calls without that text, prior to, they're doing the same thing I am. They're just screening the number and
Which-
not answering.
Which hopefully I can throw out names. I think he wouldn't care. I'll just say first names. But one of our best recruiters, Steve, when I was talking with him about his process, that was the very first thing he mentioned. When talking about what's working well for you right now, he said, I send everyone a text before I call them. And I get way more people on the phone.
I think one thing we kind of mentioned it just in the how many you're searching, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But I think a little bit of framework needs for this, everything we're talking about, and then we'll go right back into it, is understanding. I think everyone, and Gino gave me this analogy. Thank you, Gino. I think everyone understands in like the housing market, the idea of a buyer's and seller's market.
Right.
Sometimes the market's where it benefits the buyer and he can be chooser, and sometimes the seller and he gets to be real choosy. Right now, when it comes to technicians and whatever industry you look at, ag, marine, diesel, whatever, it is an employee market and not an employer market.
Mm-hmm.
And with the amount of revenue most people are making from one good technician, it would behoove you to like understand what we're talking about here of like, they kind of have the power. You need them more than they need you. So if you want to get a leg up, if you want to get more quality techs in the shop, everything we're saying about this process, like I can imagine someone listening to it and be like, I ain't got the time for that. I mean, if they want a job, they'll call back. You can't do that, right? Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to caveat everything. It's like our third caveat of the episode. Caveat everything we say with that idea of it's definitely an employee market right now in this particular field. So
Yes.
With that being said, go back to what you were saying about like, how are we ensuring that we are contacting anyone that shows any sort of interest?
Oftentimes when you go to a career site for one of these roles, positions, they want you to create an account before you can even apply.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to create an account, go to your email to get the confirmation code, go back to the website, put in your confirmation code, upload a resume, complete a full application.
Mm-hmm.
Then somebody might call you back at some point in the future. So what the data says is by removing that process and making it so much easier, when you target these more experienced techs and remove that friction, then they can go learn about the position, fill out a short form, put automation on top of that so that they're on a phone call with someone quickly, if possible. If not, at least you can text and email them right away so the process has begun.
Yes. And caveat number 4, a partner can help you with all this. It's not all on you to have all these systems and tools in place. We can help you with this if you'll let us.
Hey, one thing I've seen, at least as a praise report from, and you say now, you mentioned it earlier, like right now it's a employee market. Now I would say it goes back to about 2020.
Yeah,
so
very
4
true.
years. But one of the things I've seen a shift, or maybe it's just coincidence, I don't know, but a larger percentage of prospects that we're talking to and that haven't become clients yet don't require the resume on the upload. It is an option.
Right.
I felt like for a very long time it was a requirement, and they were just knocking out a very large percentage of even the people who would be interested. They don't have a resume.
Right.
Anyway, that's somewhat of a praise. I have seen a shift there that it is an option, but it's not required. Praise God.
Now, speaking of tools, we talk about tools to remove friction from the process. You mentioned that a lot of times maybe it's going to a shop manager and he wants to comb through and say, well, these guys, not these guys, these guys.
Right.
There's also tools to pre-qualify at the front end so that if there are specific ones that are like, they don't have the qualification I'm looking for, you can knock those out so you're not doing that, right? How many,
Yes.
is that also another point of friction? Well, it's really a point of friction in your process, but it ends up getting dumped into the time that the technician is waiting to hear back from people.
Yeah, not all job boards are created equal, so their processes will vary depending on which one you're using.
Yep.
But oftentimes on a job board, you're just saying you're interested in uploading a resume. Another way that we're talking about here is, hey, yeah, there's a few questions you need to answer first.
Mm-hmm.
But based on how you answer those questions, it will kind of tell you up front whether this process should continue or, hey, it's maybe not a good fit at this point. So yes, a little bit of friction there.
Yeah.
But like you said, it actually removes friction down the road where, employers aren't talking to people who aren't qualified, and those who aren't qualified aren't taking the time to have a conversation with someone when it's not the right fit.
And if you're serious about getting someone on the phone and talking to someone that looks good, their resume is looking great, how many call attempts are we talking?
It's 6 to 8 over a week.
What have you heard from clients many times about how many attempts they're making?
I don't have a hard stat, but I would say 2 to 3 is. A lot of times I hear between 2 and 4, and that includes email. And you'll find out that it's 1 call and 3 emails. So they'll tell you 4 attempts, but calls specifically 1 or 2.
And so you're saying 6 to 8 calls.
Well, again, I've seen some people be very good when they do the text first. Or when you're asking a question on the form that says, and we've got a couple clients that use Calendly, that you can schedule your own time, or what is the best time for us to reach you, that tends to work pretty well. So
Right.
you're going to cut down. I don't have to call you 6 times. I may only have to call you a couple times.
Okay. So we're still in the process bucket. We're in the process bucket. We're talking about friction that you're creating that is making it harder on you to fill technician roles.
Can I give you another one, or you already have one where you go?
Nope. And I wanted to know what we got what else we got, because I want to get back to the secret shopper idea because it's so important. But what are other things we should be looking for?
Pay. Pay is a big one that I see every executive balk at initially on the call. It's now they are less apprehensive once we talk through some of the data. If you do a average weekly pay instead of hourly,
you're saying you're talking about listing it.
They don't.
Yeah.
A lot do not list it.
Right.
Or are scared to list it, or they want to be safe and do 20 to 50. Right. Depending on experience. Obviously, there's that. But if you can say, on average, our mechanics make, what did we say earlier, 1,700? So between 12 and 1,800 a week.
Yep.
But there is such an apprehension to listing pay, which when you add the other things, they're not actually looking for a job, and you're on, channels that don't have a ton of job search traffic, for that position. You won't list pay, your username or password.
Yeah.
You require a resume. I mean, there are times where we're like,
right. And that's what we were saying is 61% of technicians have not changed jobs in the last 5 years. They are willing, but that's too much friction for me this is already too much friction for me to continue. So you talked about this earlier, the idea of secret shopping. Secret shopping, which why don't you say what that means and why it's so important, especially on this topic of friction in your process.
Some of it's self-serving on our end, especially before we start a campaign. When I mentioned earlier about a speed date, but if there are certain things that are said, we just want to identify that process before we go live and just kind of take a look at it. How easy was it to fill out? What was the automation you have in place, or the engagement we get after the fact, speed to lead, frequency, what is the message? What is the subject line? You see that a lot. One client, the subject line said Randall Reilly form. So, and then in the email they said, hey, whatever the secret. Hey, Jonathan, thank you for your interest. We received your Randall Reilly form, and someone will be reaching out to you. So we were at least able to, when we started, say, hey, let's change the subject line. They're not going to know.
Yeah. We're supposed to be silently in the
background. They saw a discovery ad on Google in their news feed. They don't know what Randall Reilly is.
Right.
So little things like that I don't want to sound condescending. That's just, it's not in their wheelhouse. So whoever built that, automation on the back end, it was good for us to catch that.
Just another example. Now, this is a fleet who hires a lot of drivers as well.
Yep.
But when doing some secret shopping, filled out an interest form for a technician role.
Yep.
And all the automated emails that came through were all about driver positions.
Yep.
So we've talked about process, friction in our clients' processes that are making it harder for them to hire technicians. Now, you said there's another thing that you've learned on the other side of things as the RPO side of our business has been engaging with technicians. What
Right.
insights have we gained there that our crowd will find useful?
Yeah, I think one of those things is as we get into these summer months, temperature controlled facilities play a bigger role. You know, if it's midsummer and there's no AC and you got the doors open, which a lot of places, you know, that's what you got to do. That may not be the type of environment somebody wants to work in. Now, there's a lot that do, and they're okay with it if the pay's good and all, the culture's good. But it's just something to take into consideration. You know, if you offer that, make sure it's in those job ads.
Which we want to be a help to. I do think crafting the message correctly is a big miss.
Right, because the strongest, according to my survey that I will be sending you, the strongest motivating factor in whether I would switch a job or not is pay. Second biggest factor, workplace culture.
Yeah.
Workplace culture. For a better culture, they would switch. Interesting there. All right, what other insights from our RPO team?
You know, one thing that was interesting that they brought up was sign-on bonuses. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about that. People that have tried it said it didn't work. Others that swear by it. And at least from the recruiter standpoint, they said they love it. And the technicians, the mechanics love it. I think in the driver space, it became a thing where people would doubt it because it was like, oh, a $10,000 sign-on bonus paid out over 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
they started to question the validity of when am I actually going to get that? So if you do have a good sign-on bonus
Yeah.
and it pays out fairly quickly, it's absolutely a big selling point.
Right.
That the recruiters say is huge when having that conversation.
Okay.
I will say, you know, we have a mix of clients. If you're a for-hire trucking company and you need mechanics, you don't really attach revenue to the mechanic. You're attaching revenue to the truck and miles.
Right.
But a large percentage of our folks, when you're talking in the service and parts space, they absolutely can attach revenue to the mechanic. And so, again, I'm not for or against sign-on bonuses. I think there's a ton of value in their benefits that a lot of clients aren't promoting. But it is pretty easy to see a $5,000 sign-on bonus to get an experienced technician, and you know, all the insight says somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 a month in known revenue from service and parts, and that's after the first month. So anyway, I'm just saying a $5,000 sign-on bonus to help attract is not the end of the world with the revenue they bring in.
Well, and I believe that we've had clients who offered relocation pay.
Yep.
Right? And I'll hit you with another hard fact from our what technicians want / what experience something. I forget the title. Whatever. Nearly half will commute up to an hour for a role. So another thing to consider.
Yeah, when I was talking to that group, they mentioned if it's within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
They said if the pay, the culture was right, that 45 minutes an hour away, they'd be willing to make that commute.
And I don't like that I went near. That was very marketing. Nearly half. What is that? Anything above 25? It was 49% said they would commute up to an hour.
You mentioned relocation fee. This was something else that having a conversation with them, they brought to my attention is oftentimes we think just of, moving locations, but they said it's also a big deal to move your tools.
Yeah.
So when we talk about relocation, it's, hey, if you've got a big, expensive set of tools,
Right.
you want to make sure that's handled with care and that you have a way to get that from A to B.
Yeah.
And some offer that, which is great.
Okay.
The only other thing that I'll mention is that the focus here is mechanics and technicians.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of revenue generating roles, within these shops, dealers. So they want to make sure that I mentioned as well that they can fill all of those.
Yeah.
It's just not those specific ones, but we've got a lot of talented individuals who can have that conversation with clerks or managers or sales reps or whoever it may be, that there's all the things that we're talking about also apply to these other roles.
All right. So we've talked about process within our clients, processes that are making it harder to fill technician roles. We've talked about what technicians have told us. We've given you lots of great insights today. We've given you lots of great insights today. And I want to end by saying, I know there's probably someone on this call. They may be wondering, what is it that Randall Reilly does different? When we talked about, hey, job boards are great. They can be an integral part. You guys are talking about going outside of those to reach experienced technicians that you would not otherwise reach because they're not actively searching for jobs. What do we do different to get better quality technicians in the door?
So this is a big one. We move up the timeline with time to fill.
Okay.
And I know that's not a specific when it comes to process.
Right.
But I think it's really important to mention because when we talk about return on investments, when you think about how much revenue one of these roles can generate, what that means to your business, to your growth, if you can take that from being, hey, we typically have that position open from 60 days to we're able to fill it in half that time in 30 days, that is double the amount of revenue, right, in that same 60-day window, by being able to fill it that much faster. And the reason you can fill it faster is process and all the things that we just talked about.
Okay.
Most of the clients we're working with, and this is different in the driver space typically than it is on the technician side, but we work closely with HR, marketing, and service manager or some type of, facility maintenance manager or something.
Right.
That's a little unique. So we are a little bit of we're an advocate for all three. I think we do help kind of bring them all together.
Okay.
And then the other piece to that is a lot of our clients sell things and marketing is stretched very thin. It's typically 80% sales focused, 20% talent acquisition. We try to run along.
We know.
We try to run alongside of that and let us help you and handle the talent acquisition piece, and you guys handle the sales piece.
Right.
So that's part of it.
Yes.
But I think from an audience perspective, and when you're talking about passive and active, that's a big part too. Is when I go back to the 80% of the budget is invested in, placing a job on a job board where we've already identified that they're not actively looking. We're trying to get other mediums, other fishing poles in the water in front of folks that are experienced but not looking. And Google discovery, display, demand gen, YouTube video pre-roll,
Facebook,
Instagram.
Yep.
That's the difference between just a boosted post on the 20 people that like the page.
We're taking a known audience of tool buyers, people who have spent money on tools to be mechanics and technicians, and we're putting that into the campaign, things that are geographically within your hiring area, and we're putting your job post in front of them regardless of whether they're actively looking or not.
Except for the 10 or 12 clients that may be on here from Canada that we are working with now, and we don't have a UCC1 filing audience.
Well,
but we're still helping them.
Yes.
So I think
that's not the only thing we can do.
Not that I don't want to devalue it, but I have success stories.
Yes.
Where we don't have an audience.
Right.
And we're still learning too. I will say, it's been eye-opening. I've been at Randall Reilly 18 years, and I feel like the last 3-4 years on the technician side, we've learned a lot, and just the intricacies of the different mechanic roles depending on the equipment they're working on, and it's pretty impressive, and the different certifications. So anyway, you do need a partner that understands that business.
Right.
And we had somebody this week that a Ford technician is not the same as a Volvo or BMW technician. Right. And there's going to be very little crossover. If anyone's apprehensive or they're saying we're doing some of this, or we hear that sometimes, we're okay. and their career page doesn't show that they're okay, 20, 30, 40 listings. Now, some of them will say, hey, those are evergreen. I don't actually have to hire them, but if somebody came through the door, we would take them. That's fine. You may not need to run a bunch of campaigns. I would just say, if you're doing the same thing you have been doing,
right,
you'll get the same results. So at least be open to maybe at certain times of the year, your fiscal year is coming up. And whether it's us or not, be open to doing something different that's outside of the box, because you're going to get, I have seen it, you're going to get a better result. You can't just keep doing what you have been doing, username, password, passive advertising, I won't list pay, all that stuff. Just, I would pray more people would be willing to try something else.
And that has been Digging Deeper.